I'm joined also by royal biographer Tom Bower, who is in central London. Tom, you've just written a book about the Duchess of Sussex.
It wasn't a headline built for outrage. That's why it landed so hard. When Tom Bower introduced a new claim in recent commentary, it didn't arrive wrapped in accusation or drama. It arrived as an assertion of fact, quietly challenging assumptions the palace believed were settled. Insiders say Meghan Markle was caught off guard, not because the claim was explosive, but because of where it pointed, not to gossip, but to process, not to opinion, but to record. Within royal circles, the reaction was immediate. Phones moved. Advisors checked timelines. The word circulating was not panic, it was an alarm. Because when Bower speaks in claims rather than questions, institutions listen. The difference this time was precision. When Tom Bower introduced his latest claim, it was not padded with conjecture or softened by speculation. According to those who heard it firsthand, the language was narrow, deliberate, and grounded in sequence. He was not arguing interpretation. He was pointing to the process. That distinction changed how the claim was received. Bower has made critical observations before, but this one landed differently because it did not ask audiences to infer motive. It asked them to reconsider mechanics, how decisions were recorded, how timelines were handled, how internal actions aligned, or failed to align, with public explanations. In royal reporting, claims about process carry more weight than claims about personality because they can be tested. Royal correspondents listening closely noticed the shift immediately. This was not a rehash of familiar disputes, it was a reframing. Bower was not revisiting what happened. He was questioning how it happened and whether that how had been fully understood. For Meghan Markle, insiders say the impact was immediate. Surprise, followed quickly by urgency. The claim did not accuse her of wrongdoing. It challenged the completeness of a narrative she believed had settled into accepted history. That challenge felt more dangerous than criticism.
Very disappointing. But on the other hand, on the plus side, Piers, it does mean that Netflix won't get the panning shot of Meghan to the Queen.
The reason is simple. Criticism can be countered. The process must be explained. According to people familiar with Meghan's initial reaction, the issue was not fear of exposure, but loss of footing. Her public strategy has often relied on clarifying intent and context. A claim anchored in procedural detail narrows the space for such a response. It shifts attention away from lived experience and toward documentation. What made the moment more volatile was Bower's restraint. He did not dramatize the claim. He did not pile on. He stated it and moved on. That restraint signaled confidence. In media culture, confidence without embellishment is often interpreted as credibility. Within hours, the claim was circulating quietly among palace watchers. Not trending, not exploding, but being discussed in the way that unsettles institutions most. Privately, analytically, with notebooks open. When correspondents start asking who knew what and when, alarms begin to sound. The claim's specificity mattered. It pointed to a particular window of time and a particular set of actions. It did not suggest deception. It suggested misalignment. Misalignment between internal handling and external narrative. That nuance is what gave it traction. Inside Meghan's camp, advisors reportedly moved quickly to reconstruct the same timeline. When claims focus on process, the first response is not rebuttal, but verification. What exists? What was documented? What language was used internally versus publicly? Each detail matters because even small inconsistencies can be magnified once attention narrows. The sense of being blindsided came from an assumption. Meghan had believed this chapter was closed because no new facts had emerged. Bower's claim suggested that facts were not the issue. Interpretation was. An interpretation can change when context is reframed. Royal insiders emphasize that this is how old stories resurface without warning, not through leaks or scandals, but through reclassification. What was once treated as settled background becomes foreground again when someone credible points to a gap. Bower's credibility rests on his method. He is known for waiting, for holding material until it clarifies rather than inflames. When he speaks in claims rather than questions, institutions pay attention because history suggests he has done the work. That history amplified the reaction. Palace aides did not rush to dismiss the claim because doing so would assume error. Instead, they treated it as a prompt, a signal to review. Review does not imply guilt, it implies caution. Meghan's position was more exposed. Unlike the palace, she could not rely on institutional opacity. Her public identity is intertwined with personal narrative. Any suggestion that process, rather than experience, is under scrutiny threatens that framework. Insiders say the realization hit hard. This was not a claim that could be addressed emotionally. It required procedural clarity. That requirement narrowed options and accelerated internal pressure. The claim also reopened a familiar vulnerability. Meghan has often argued that the systems failed to adequately support her. Bauer's assertion inverted that lens, suggesting that systems themselves may not have been presented clearly to the public. Even if that suggestion was neutral, it complicated a story built on transparency versus concealment. Media reaction remained measured at this stage. Editors did not rush headlines. Analysts waited. That waiting was itself a signal. When journalists pause, it usually means they are checking. What unsettled Meghan most, according to those close to her, was the sense that control had shifted subtly but decisively. The conversation was no longer about belief. It was about alignment. Alignment can be audited. This was the moment she understood that this claim was different. It did not invite debate. It invited scrutiny. And scrutiny, once invited, rarely limits itself to a single question. The reaction inside Buckingham Palace was not visible, but it was unmistakable to those who know the signs. When Tom Bauer makes a claim framed around process rather than personality, it triggers a different internal response. This was not treated as commentary to be ignored. It was treated as a variable to be assessed. 155, 1-4.
And why has she come here? Has she come here to apologise to the Queen? Has she come here to say that she's sorry to the Duchess of Cambridge? Or is she here to promote it?
Palace systems are built to distinguish noise from signal. Opinion generates noise. Procedural claims generate a signal because they can be tested against records, briefings, and internal timelines. According to royal correspondents with long-standing institutional contacts, that distinction is what caused the quiet alarm. The first step was not messaging. It was reconstruction. Who handled what? Which offices were involved? How information moved internally, and how it was later described publicly. This kind of review is routine, but its urgency depends on credibility. Bauer's credibility accelerated the process. Importantly, the palace did not frame the situation as a defense of Meghan Markle or a rebuttal of her critics. The concern was narrower and more institutional. Did the claim intersect with palace procedure, or did it sit entirely within personal decision-making? That boundary matters because it determines whether the institution is implicated at all. Insiders stress that no one assumed wrongdoing. The monarchy does not operate on assumptions of guilt. It operates on risk minimization. Even neutral claims can create reputational exposure if they suggest inconsistency. Consistency is the monarchy's primary currency. This is why silence followed. When institutions speak too quickly, they harden positions. When they wait, they preserve flexibility. The absence of comment was not indifference, it was deliberation. Royal aides familiar with crisis protocol describe a standard rule. If a claim references documentation, do not contradict it until you understand its scope. Contradiction without knowledge risks being disproven later. Silence avoids that risk. The palace also understood the asymmetry of the moment. Tom Bauer was not demanding a response. He had not escalated. Responding aggressively would have elevated the claim beyond its current footprint. By staying still, the institution limited amplification. Correspondents noticed the restraint immediately. There were no background briefings dismissing the claim, no off-the-record assurances that it was baseless. That absence signaled seriousness. When the palace believes something is trivial, it often allows trusted voices to quietly minimize it. This time, nothing moved. Internally, attention focused on precedent. Had similar procedural claims surfaced before? How were they handled? What lessons applied? The monarchy's memory is long, and its response is shaped by accumulated experience rather than emotion. One senior observer summarized the mood succinctly. This was not panic, it was caution. Panic produces leaks. Caution produces silence. The palace's approach also reflected King Charles III's governing style. Charles favors consolidation over confrontation. He prefers to absorb pressure rather than deflect it publicly. That instinct guided the response here. By allowing the claim to circulate without engagement, the palace positioned itself as observer rather than participant. That posture matters. It keeps the institution above the narrative rather than inside it. For Meghan, this posture felt different. Silence from the palace did not read as protection, it read as distance. The institution was insulating itself rather than intervening. Whether intentional or not, that perception heightened her sense of exposure. From the palace's perspective, intervention would have been inappropriate. The claim did not originate from within the institution, nor did it accuse the institution directly. Engaging would have blurred responsibility. The seriousness of the internal response lay not in outward reaction, but in inward preparation. Records were reviewed, language was scrutinized, timelines were aligned. This is how institutions protect themselves against future escalation, not present controversy. Observers emphasize that this kind of alarm does not mean the claim is true. It means it is credible enough to warrant attention. Credibility, in this context, is about method, not outcome. The palace's silence also served another function. It avoided creating a counter-narrative that could later be undermined. When documentation is involved, premature narratives age badly. Waiting preserves optionality. This left Meghan in a more isolated position. Without institutional voice, she bore the weight of interpretation alone. Her advisors understood this imbalance immediately. The palace could wait indefinitely. Individuals cannot. The result was a quiet but significant shift. The claim had not exploded publicly, but it had altered internal dynamics. The palace moved into watchful mode. Meghan moved into response mode. That divergence is where alarm lives, not in headlines, but in behavior. By the end of this phase, one thing was clear to everyone watching closely. This claim would not be dismissed casually. It would be monitored, contextualized, and allowed to either fade or evolve on its own terms. And in royal life, when something is allowed to evolve rather than be crushed, it is because the institution recognizes potential consequences. That recognition is what made this moment different. The shift in tone reached Meghan Markle before it reached the headlines. According to people familiar with her response, the initial surprise hardened quickly into calculation. This was not a claim she could dismiss as misinterpretation or hostility. It was framed around sequence and handling. That framing narrowed her options immediately. Insiders describe a sharp pivot from confidence to containment. Meetings were convened with a single objective: determine exposure. Not public exposure, but structural exposure. What records existed? Who handled them? Which descriptions had been used publicly? And whether those descriptions could be challenged by process alone. The work was granular, unspectacular, and urgent. What unsettled Meghan most was the absence of a clear antagonist. There was no inflammatory quote to rebut, no accusation to dismantle. Tom Bower had made his point and moved on. That restraint forced Meghan's team to operate without the friction that often reveals strategy. Silence from the source meant the burden of interpretation fell squarely on her. Advisors debated response paths and found each one constricting. A direct rebuttal risked elevating a claim that had not yet metastasized. A contextual explanation risked acknowledging a procedural conversation the public had not fully entered. Silence preserved flexibility but intensified private anxiety. The decision matrix offered no clean exits. The pressure manifested as compression. According to those close to her, Meghan's circle tightened. Information sharing became selective. Decisions centralized. This was not chaos. It was a defensive posture born of uncertainty. When claims focus on process, every stray comment becomes a potential exhibit. Prince Harry occupied an uneasy middle ground. Insiders say his instinct was restraint. He recognized the danger of converting a narrow claim into a public dispute. His counsel emphasized patience, verification, and minimal engagement. He had learned, often the hard way, that institutions outlast reactions. That counsel did not eliminate tension. Meghan felt the clock ticking even as Harry urged waiting. The divergence was not philosophical. It was temporal. Institutions can wait. Individuals feel exposed as time passes. Each hour without clarity amplifies risk. The sense of being on the back foot came from realization rather than revelation. The claim reframed an old period without introducing new facts. That reframing shifted leverage. If the discussion moved toward records and handling, then empathy and intent would carry less weight. Meghan's preferred terrain narrowed. Advisors attempted to re-establish footing by identifying uncontested anchors. What could be said without opening new lines of inquiry? What could be left unsaid without appearing evasive? The language had to be spare because abundance invites comparison. Comparison favors documentation. The palace's continued silence compounded the effect. Without an institutional buffer, Meghan bore interpretation alone. Silence that once felt protective now felt distancing. The monarchy's stillness did not read as endorsement or condemnation. It read as insulation. That insulation altered how the claim was perceived. Commentators began treating it as a matter for analysis rather than dispute. Analysis is colder. It strips away emotion and asks whether pieces align. Alignment can be measured. Inside Meghan's camp, that shift sharpened urgency. The team recognized that once analysis replaces debate, reputational movement becomes incremental and harder to reverse. Small doubts accumulate quietly. They do not need headlines to persist. The strategy settled on watchfulness, paired with readiness. No statement unless necessary. No engagement unless prompted by escalation. Preparation without performance. This posture required discipline because it offers no immediate relief. Meghan's anger, according to those close to her, transformed into resolve. Not resolve to confront, but resolve to limit future vulnerability. The lesson drawn was not about this claim alone, but about exposure patterns. Process-based scrutiny invites audits of past handling. Future handling would be tighter.
Big smiles as she edged towards the window to make sure that the camera should see her with her oversized hat was all part of the Promote Meghan show.
Harry's role shifted from directive to stabilizing. He supported restraint while acknowledging strain. His focus remained long-term. Once a claim about process enters circulation, it does not vanish with denial. It fades only when attention moves elsewhere or when clarity emerges organically. The waiting was the hardest part. Without escalation, there was nothing to answer. Without answers, there was nothing to conclude. The situation existed in suspension, and suspension breeds anxiety. By the end of this phase, Meghan understood that the ground had shifted beneath her without warning. She was no longer managing opinion. She was navigating scrutiny. The difference is subtle but consequential. Opinion responds to persuasion. Scrutiny responds to consistency. That understanding marked the true turning point. Not a headline, not a rebuttal, but an internal recalibration. The claim had done its work, simply by reframing the conversation. From here on, every decision would be made with that reframing in mind. The lasting impact of Tom Bower's latest claim was not measured by headlines, but by behavior. Institutions changed posture. Advisors adjusted their tone. Silence lengthened. In royal life, those are the markers that matter. Stories fade. Process lingers. What made this moment different was not novelty. It was a reclassification. A familiar period was suddenly viewed through a procedural lens rather than a personal one. That shift does not demand verdicts. It demands audits. Once audits begin, narratives stop moving forward and start looping back. For Meghan Markle, the challenge became living with an open question rather than closing a chapter. Open questions exert pressure even when unanswered. They shape how future claims are heard and how past explanations are revisited. The claim did not need to be proven publicly to matter privately. Its power lay in plausibility, anchored to method. Inside Buckingham Palace, the response settled into institutional patience. That patience was strategic. When claims point to handling rather than wrongdoing, institutions benefit from time. Time allows context to cool, memory to blur, and urgency to dissipate. Speaking too early would have created a target. Waiting turned the claim into an object of study rather than a source of conflict. This posture altered the balance between the individual and the institution. The palace could wait indefinitely because it did not need a resolution to function. Meghan could not. Her public life requires narrative coherence. Even neutral ambiguity threatens coherence by inviting reinterpretation. Observers noted a subtle but telling change in coverage. The claim was referenced less as an accusation and more as a caveat. If accurate, if documented, if aligned. Conditional language is powerful because it preserves doubt without asserting a conclusion. Once introduced, doubt does not require reinforcement to persist. That persistence forced a strategic pivot. Rather than attempting to close the claim, Meghan's advisors focused on narrowing its relevance. The goal was to prevent it from becoming a universal lens applied to unrelated issues. Compartmentalization became essential. Not every conversation needed to touch on process. Not every past moment needed reassessment. Yet, compartmentalization is fragile in the digital age. Archives connect narratives automatically. A claim about handling invites questions about consistency elsewhere. Consistency is not a moral judgment. It is an operational one. Operations leave traces. The broader consequence was a shift in how credibility is negotiated. Personal testimony competes poorly with procedural suggestion. Even when testimony is sincere, it struggles against the implication that systems tell a different story. Systems are impersonal. That impersonality reads as neutrality. For Prince Harry, the episode reinforced a hard-earned lesson. Institutions absorb pressure by slowing time. Individuals experience pressure by accelerating it. His counsel remained steady. Avoid escalation. Preserve optionality. Let attention move. He understood that forcing closure could entrench the very scrutiny they sought to avoid. The difficulty was emotional rather than tactical. Living under implied scrutiny drains energy. It demands vigilance without offering release. Meghan's frustration, according to those close to her, stemmed from that asymmetry. The palace could afford to be silent. She felt compelled to remain alert. Over weeks, the claim receded from prominence without resolution. That outcome may appear anticlimactic, but it is typical of process-based scrutiny. Such claims rarely explode. They resurface, quietly, at inconvenient moments, during unrelated discussions, as footnotes that color interpretation. This is how one claim reopens everything without explicitly reopening anything. It embeds itself as context. Context shapes meaning without demanding proof. It changes the angle from which future stories are viewed. The monarchy's long memory amplified this effect. Royal institutions are accustomed to deferred consequence. They record, archive, and revisit. They do not require immediate answers. That culture contrasts sharply with modern media cycles, which reward immediacy. Bower's claim bridged those cultures by invoking process in a public forum. For Meghan, the strategic path forward involved recalibration rather than rebuttal. More controlled environments, fewer extended engagements, clearer boundaries around documentation. These moves were defensive, not defiant. They acknowledged risk without conceding substance.
They keep preaching about the environment and about the need to save our carbon footprint. And then we discover they got here from California on a private...
Critics framed this as avoidance. Supporters framed it as prudence. Both interpretations coexist. What matters is effect. Reduced exposure limits future variables, but it can also reinforce perceptions of management. The trade-off is unavoidable. The episode also prompted a broader reckoning about how public figures coexist with archives. Every appearance generates material that can be reframed later. The assumption that editing fixes meaning is increasingly fragile. Extended recordings exist. Context can be reassembled. Bower's role remained paradoxical. By not pressing the claim further, he preserved its credibility. Escalation would have invited rebuttal. Restraint allowed the claim to breathe without confrontation. Whether intentional or instinctive, the effect was lasting. The palace's alarm never became public panic because it did not need to. Alarm, in institutional terms, is internal readiness. It is a review without reaction. That readiness ensures that if the claim resurfaces with additional detail, the institution is not caught unprepared. For Meghan, the cost of readiness was psychological. Being perpetually prepared for reinterpretation is exhausting. It narrows spontaneity and encourages caution. Over time, that caution shapes public presence. The final consequence of this moment is subtle but enduring. It shifted the default posture from confidence to calibration. Calibration is not a weakness. It is an adjustment to a changed environment, but it signals that something has altered beneath the surface.
A big smile and letting down the window of her car so she can be seen.
Yeah.
I mean, here is a woman who, as you know better than anyone else, according to you, lied.
One claim did not redefine truth. It redefined attention. It reminded everyone involved that narratives anchored to experience can be unsettled by questions anchored to process. Process does not accuse. It persists. As attention moved on, the claim remained available, dormant but intact. That dormancy is its power. It can be recalled without warning, applied without explanation, and cited without resolution. In royal life, such claims become part of the weather. They do not storm continuously, they change the climate. Decisions are made differently under an altered climate. So are risks. Meghan did not see this coming because it did not look like a fight. It looked like a footnote. Footnotes, however, are where history hides its leverage. The alarm that sparked inside the palace was not about defense. It was about awareness. Awareness that process-based scrutiny quietly and permanently alters stakes. And that is why this claim mattered long after the moment passed. Some stories don't explode. They destabilize quietly. If you want sharp, careful breakdowns of how a single claim can trigger institutional alarm and why silence often speaks loudest, subscribe, share your thoughts, and stay with us as we follow what happens when assumptions stop holding.